But first, a former soldier from Leeds who pretended to have cancer and post-traumatic stress disorder in order to receive thousands of pounds in cash and services has been jailed. 44-year-old Simon Buckden admitted 6 counts of fraud. The jury heard he'd lied about frontline service in Northern Ireland, Rwanda and both Gulf Wars. Well, John Cundy was in court for us. Hello, John.
Hi, Gayle.
Tell us what's happened then.
Well, first of all, of course, Simon Buckden was sentenced to 16 months in jail. The judge, Christopher Batty, said that he'd been asked to suspend the sentence, but in view of all he'd heard in the court and the fact that on Friday Buckden finally admitted guilty to the 6 charges of fraud against him. That was on the 5th day of his trial, and he said in view of all that, there's no doubt that Simon Buckden must go to jail. But the story begins, I suppose, 2001, when Buckden was discharged from the army on the grounds of mental health. And then in 2012, he began to claim he was suffering post-traumatic stress disorder. Mark you, that was 11 years after he'd left the army. And he then also started telling people that he'd got cancer. This was the same year, of course, that he'd carried the Olympic torch through Leeds, 2012. And all in all, it was worked out that he'd raised £8,000 in terms of cash and free services that he'd conned people out of doing. And this was seen as a betrayal of so many people. There were 6 victims in particular, but also, the fact that he'd lied about having cancer to people that had cancer. And the fact was he'd never had it, and he was never in the forefront of the war at any time.
So what have the police said?
Well, they were, of course, very disparaging towards what he'd been claiming. They said he'd damaged so many people in the course of what he'd done. And I spoke to Detective Chief Inspector Mark Swift from West Yorkshire Police.
Simon Buckden created a fantasy image of himself, of a decorated war hero and cancer sufferer. He lied to those closest to him, to genuine sufferers of trauma, to the public and to the media. Although the monetary gain in this deception wasn't significant, the betrayal felt by many people was enormous. And I hope that they will take some degree of comfort and satisfaction from today's result.
So what other reaction has there been? Apparently SAS veteran and author Andy McNabb has called his actions sickening. Yes,
well, he said, Gayle, and I quote, "It doesn't matter whether he, Buckden, is claiming to be SAS or anybody." Of course, he wasn't in the SAS at all. He said the fact that he was using other people's courage, experience and tragedy to gain sympathy and attention is sickening. And the trial judge said that his lying about having cancer was simply breathtaking. He said he was just a dishonest and manipulative man. But also during his trial, it emerged that Buckden had posed as a member of the SAS. He'd worn medals at the Cenotaph services at Leeds and Newcastle, but he bought the medals on the internet. He'd never been in the SAS at all. And that was making somebody who followed this case in court, Rob Paxman, a former serviceman, very angry.
Is absolutely horrendous. He's harassed people continuously, and there's a lot that didn't come out in court. There's a lot of damage been done to people and organisations and charities and individuals. It's absolutely unthinkable that this man has been allowed to get away with this for so long. So today is really, really a very good day for us.
Well, thank you to John. I've been speaking to Richard Norman from Brand Yorkshire, an organisation set up to help businesses in the Yorkshire region. Richard told me how he'd been deceived by Simon Buckden.
I met him about 3 years ago. We run a conference, the Brand Yorkshire Conference, annual conference once a year. We get about 1,500 to 1,600 people there each year, and he was going to be one of the main speakers actually at the event.
Oh.
When I met Simon, everything seemed in order in terms of if somebody came up to you and told you that he'd had cancer and he was trying to defeat it, you'd believe him. Also, my father died of cancer, so when he actually explained about his story of resilience and all the running and marathons he'd done, I was pretty impressed in terms of the story that he was to give to our audience. About 10 days before the conference, I got a letter from a guy called Richard McCann, who actually said that Simon might not be the person you think he is. So he then went on to explain why that was, about his military record, and also that he doubted whether he actually had cancer or not. Spent the whole weekend thinking about it, and then decided to give Simon a ring on the Monday morning just to ask him some questions. He wouldn't speak to me. I spoke to his girlfriend Louisa, Louisa turned round and said, no, he has definitely had cancer. And the fact that he has got a great army record and actually been in the SAS. When I actually then asked, I said, I know it's a difficult question, but have you got any proof that he has had cancer? Because obviously there's so many people now questioning it. And they turned round and said, we do not have to prove that he's got cancer or not. So after speaking to another 2 or 3 people involved in the event, we decided that Simon wasn't going to speak at the event, and I actually rang him and told him so. He just put the phone down on me. But then about 2 days later, we got a letter from him, an email from him, threatening Brand Yorkshire and myself with all different kinds of things. I spoke to him on the phone, and I don't take kindly to being threatened and bullied, so I explained to him exactly how I felt about what he had done. And then over the next sort of 2 or 3 weeks leading up to the conference and after the conference, we just got a barrage of tweet messages against us and against Brand Yorkshire and against me personally. After then speaking to another couple of people, one was a guy called Phil Lee, who was one of the main witnesses, I believe, at the trial. We decided to go and actually speak to their charity, and they just ignored what we were saying about what we now knew was almost the truth. And then we just started to have conversations with the people and found out that he clearly did not have cancer. Did
you feel like when you were getting these threats, these personal threats, as well as, I imagine, legal threats as well, did you feel that you were starting to become harassed?
I felt harassed, but to be honest, when people bully me like that, I actually become a bit tougher. I'm quite fortunate. But then after speaking to many other people, there ended up being a Facebook page where at least 45 other people were actually part of that Facebook page. And the majority of them had gone through a similar situation like I had. And in fact, some of the bullying towards some of those other people was a real problem. They actually had Simon Buckden sat outside their homes and actually threatening them and threatening their family. So we actually started to hear some really horrible stories about how he was threatening people and bullying people.
What do you think drives somebody to behave like this?
Well, I've done a lot of work within the prison service and actually worked for 18 months in Army Prison and the Young Offenders Institute. And I believe Simon Buckden was bordering on being a sociopath.
Right, so you think he might have some mental problems?
I just can't believe that somebody can act like this in any rational part of the way. And if you look at the 10 main symptoms of a sociopath, if you could tick every single one for Simon Buckden.
So on Friday, we heard that he changed his plea to guilty. Was that surprising to you?
Very surprising. Don't know the reason why. Probably because he then realised that he might be able to get less time in prison. And obviously, today he's obviously got some time in prison.
16 months is it is time. You know, at the end of the day, he's going to be doing some time. Is it enough?
Yeah, I think it probably is. For me, the most important part of the whole thing now is that anybody that searches Simon Buckden's name on either social media or within Google or any other kind of search engine, obviously this story will now come out. He actually utilises bullying for this story to stop coming out. And that's one of the reasons why it didn't come out. He actually made people so fearful about their own safety that it actually stopped this coming out to stop other people being affected by it.
It's very sad, isn't it? It's very sad that so many people have been hurt, but you actually seem pretty tough, and you seem like you might have been helpful in unravelling it all a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's a definite thanks to people like Phil Lee, once again, who's an ex-soldier himself, and he was bullied in the same way, or certainly harassed in the same way, and he made sure the police were involved. He made sure that everybody else stuck together, and all 40 odd people on the Facebook page, when it started looking at the stories that were coming out, it was quite scary.
Thank you for joining us this afternoon in what must be quite unusual circumstances. But thank you very much, Richard Norman from Brand Yorkshire.
Thank you.